BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the Teespring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin.
Alright, hello everybody. Today is Friday, another Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? First, I would like to give a big thank you to everyone who listened to the recent True Crime Talk radio segment that came out on Wednesday talking about the Darlie Routier case, as well as some other true crime cases. And True Crime Talk Radio was a segment that I did mostly in the earlier part of this year, as well as a little bit in 2021, where I would talk about several different stories, and I did a little bit about Anthony Robinson, the shopping cart killer. I mentioned him very briefly on the channel, but recently I started reading the book Exposed by Mark Hewitt, which talks about the Unabomber, and I often try to compare the behavior of serial killers and look at, well, how did this person operate? How did that person operate? And I'm reading this book about the Unabomber and thinking, well, I'm reminded of some of the details about the shopping cart killer. However, I couldn't remember the story 100% word for word, and I simply wanted to read up on his case again, as well as on the stories of the victims, and I wanted to pay attention to some very particular details, and that's what I'll be discussing in this episode here. And one more time, I'm reading the book Exposed because it is for Zodiac Monday. Exposed is about the Zodiac Unabomber connection, the idea that the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, who is currently serving 8 life sentences in prison and is actually in a medical facility, was also the Zodiac Killer. And if you'd like to hear more about that, you can tune in to the Zodiac Killer News Report on Monday, and I've been discussing the book Exposed for the episodes that have been coming out in November and December of 2022. The Zodiac Killer News Reports are all organized by date, and you can always like and subscribe, as well as visit BuyMeACoffee.com, a page which allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and any donation or contribution will get you a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. But the shopping cart killer was a story that took the news by storm in 2021 because it's not a serial killer case from 30 years ago or 40 years ago or 60 years ago. It's something that's happening right now, and the news is still coming out, so that no matter how well people learned the story in 2021, there are still new developments, and there was one just several weeks ago. And to help us out, I'm going to go over to an article from WHSV.com, and this one was written by Kayla Brooks, just citing the source. Virginia. The alleged shopping cart killer appeared in Harrison Rockingham Court Monday, September 12, 2022. Anthony Robinson is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and felony concealing of a dead body. Robinson has been dubbed the shopping cart killer by law enforcement after he was accused of transporting his victims by a shopping cart. Robinson appeared in court for a judge to decide if there's enough evidence for him to face trial for 4 charges. Robinson is charged with the murders of Tanita Smith and Beth Redman. But there is something that is a breaking news development. people might be thinking about, okay, a serial killer and he's murdered 2 victims. That is possible, however, there are 3 additional victims that were most likely murdered by Anthony Robinson, the shopping cart killer. And then, the reason why these news stories kept coming out in 2022 is that a 6th victim has been linked to him. But bear in mind, he is only he's only in court for these 2 murders, and then there could be substantial evidence later on that will connect him to 6 murders. Robinson appeared in court for a judge to determine if there's enough evidence for him to face trial. Sergeant Brooke Wetherill testified Monday as an investigator in the case. Wetherill said that the investigators believed that Robinson was staying at a Howard Johnson hotel. The court reviewed security camera footage of each woman on separate occasions, about a month apart, entering Robinson's room at the hotel. Both times he eventually pulled a shopping cart with something in it out of the hotel, and the shopping carts contained the woman's remains. Redmond was last seen on October 24th of 2021, and at the time of her disappearance, investigators didn't know where to look. Smith was last seen in mid-November, and investigators were able to check phone records and see if that she had been around the Howard Johnson. It's at that point that investigators found both Smith and Redmond wrapped in bed sheets along the tree line off of Linda Lane. The women were about 15 feet apart from each other. Wetherill said, Smith was nude from the waist down, and her top bra had been pulled, and the ties had been placed around her ankles and waists. The courts also viewed photos from the security camera footage at Walmart from October 22nd, where Anthony Robinson was buying black yarn that matched what was used to tie up Smith. Redmond was found to be in an advanced state of decomposition, according to the medical examiner. Wetherill said that upon investigation in the room Robinson stayed in, there was blood found on the bed along with Smith's phone, clothing, and ID. And I just have to jump in right there. It seems like that this person, Anthony Robinson, is luring women to this hotel, murdering them, and then disposing of their bodies with the shopping cart, but he's definitely not doing a very thoughtful job, leaving behind all types of evidence. And sometimes people concoct these plans in their mind where they think they're going to get away with it. However, in retrospect, it seems so ridiculously obvious that they're going to get caught. I mean, if blood is left in the bed and it could be connected to a victim, and even if you don't need DNA testing to leave behind someone's phone, clothing, and ID, they would know that she is there. And then even if her body's going to turn up nearby, that means you would immediately become a suspect. I mean, think about all the times that I've said the words security camera footage so far, and let alone that he's buying the black yarn that is used to tie up the victims. All of it is coming together and zeroing in on him. During Redmond's autopsy, meth was found in her system, but the medical examiner doesn't believe that the substance caused her death. However, because of the loss of tissue around her neck, they weren't able to determine a certain cause. The medical examiner's office wasn't able to determine an exact cause of death for either woman, but listed the cause of death as homicidal violence. And I can totally comprehend why they're saying that, because advanced states of decomposition, the bodies were left outside just in open area. They were transported by a shopping cart for a reason, so that Anthony Robinson could get rid of the bodies. And it can be difficult for a jury to convict someone if they cannot determine the cause of death, because how would they be able to say that someone was murdered if they don't know exactly how they were murdered? So that can affect things in the legal sense. But I'm going to be very blunt with you right now. I think that he did it. And the reason why I was thinking about this story, when I was reading the book Exposed, all about the Zodiac Unabomber connection, whether it's the Zodiac Killer or the Unabomber, someone who is composing these master plans, not only committing crimes, leaving behind signatures, taunting clues for the police to figure out, or the Unabomber just assembling these bombs and traveling enormous distances to mail the bombs, and just to get revenge on society. And that is what people conceive of And that is why I was thinking about the shopping cart killer, because there are thoughtful serial killers out there who put an enormous amount of planning into their crimes because they want revenge on society. And I know that this isn't something that people want to hear, but when someone says the term serial killer, people might conceive of a white man, aged 20 to 45, who was very neglected growing up, very antisocial, didn't have a lot of friends, not good at attracting sexual partners. And then he's just very frustrated and angry at the world, so he becomes a serial killer. He puts on this facade of being a very gentle person in his daily life, and then he goes out and murders people during the dark hours. Darkness has fallen upon the earth. But the problem is, though, that concept is absolutely false. It's baloney. That's not how serial killers function, and serial killers don't always fit that dynamic, and in fact, many of them, no matter what their race or status are just not in that particular set of criteria, because serial killers do not play by the rules. Prime example, Anthony Robinson, the shopping cart killer, murdered his victims. He lured them to the hotel, and my take on the subject is this was a set of perverted behaviors that got out of control. And he is bringing them to the hotel, perhaps giving them drugs, on the premise that they're going to get drugs. They're saying that the woman had meth in her system. And I'm using a little bit of guesswork, but it seems like he's doing some types of perverted acts with them, murdering them, tying up their bodies with black yarn, wrapping them in the bed sheets, and then pushing them in the shopping cart to the dump site. So, perverted behavior that got out of control. There's no master plan. There's no revenge on society. It's just doing things to fuel his own sexual desires and showing absolutely no regard for human life. Not all serial killers are the same. And furthermore, this whole thing about how a serial killer is a sad, lonely man. Many serial killers are married with children, and they still go on and become serial killers. You got people like the Golden State Killer Joseph D'Angelo. You got people like BTK, Dennis Rader, married with children. They're still serial killers. And there are just going to be countless other examples that you're going to be thinking of right now of someone who isn't in this mold of somebody who is a 20 to 45-year-old white man who was never married and has no friends. I mean, serial killers operate in almost every type of race and demographic that you can possibly think of. But there's an article from the New York Post that came out rather recently talking about the sixth victim of Anthony Robinson, the shopping cart killer. Shopping cart killer Anthony Robinson linked to the death of a sixth woman, and this one was written by Sinyeva Farbarov. An accused serial murderer dubbed the shopping cart killer has now been linked to the death of a sixth woman in Virginia, whose death was previously suspected to be the result of cardiac arrhythmia. Anthony Eugene Robinson, age 35, has already been charged with the slayings of two women whose bodies were found in a vacant lot. He has also been named a suspect in 3 other murders in the state of Virginia and Washington, D.C. Now the authorities in Prince George's County are trying to determine if Robinson played a role in the February 2018 death of 30-year-old Sky Allen, whom he dated. Sky Allen's mother, Stacy Allen, told NBC Washington that she believed that her daughter died from murder as opposed to a heart condition after she found her unconscious and struggling to breathe inside the bedroom that she shared with Anthony Robinson on Valentine's Day. The doctor at Prince George's County Hospital Center said that Sky died of cardiac arrhythmia, but her mother said that she suspected Anthony Robinson of wrongdoing and even asked him directly if he killed Sky. I asked him, "Do you know something about my daughter?" And he said no, the mother claimed. In November of 2021, more than 3 years after her daughter's death, Stacy Allen said that she was contacted by a detective from Rockingham County in Virginia asking about Robinson, the man arrested in connection with the killings of Aline Redmond, age 54, Tanita Smith, age 39, and victims were killed on October 24th and November 14th of 2021, respectively. Their bodies were discovered together on November 23rd in a vacant lot next to a shopping cart that the authorities said had been used to transport the bodies, earning Robinson the macabre moniker, the shopping cart killer. And, I mean, this is a terrible story, but it just goes to show you that people are going to try and hide their destructive tendencies. And I was talking recently about Arthur Bomar, the Stone Cold Killer, on the channel, and I have a larger episode about him called the Long Island Serial Killer versus the Stone Cold Killer Psychological Breakdown. And Arthur Bomar was a serial killer who would drive behind women, and he would tap the bumper of their car and get them to pull over because he had rear-ended the car. And then he would assault them, murder them, and he was caught because he ran over one victim and the heat from the oil pan on his car was imprinted onto her body. But I think that it's a very similar operation to Anthony Robinson. Perverted behavior that got out of control, opportunistic, predatory behavior that got out of control, inflicting pain upon people to fuel one's own excitement, as opposed to some grossly calculated master plan to destroy civilization and make a mockery of it. No, this is someone who was rough with women in the past, and the rough tendencies escalated. And I'm not like I was there watching their life stories, Anthony Robinson or Arthur Bomar, but it appears that that's what's going on. Back to the article. Fairfax County Police have said publicly that they have linked Anthony Robinson to the killings of two women. Police said Robinson was staying at the Moon Inn Hotel at the time and had been linked to Brown via cell phone and video evidence. It seems that before he was using the Howard Johnson, he was using the Moon Inn Hotel as a way to meet women for abusive reasons. Since then, Robinson has also been tied to the death of 40-year-old Sonia Champ, whose body was found in a shopping cart in northeast D.C. in September of 2021. So far, Robinson has not been charged in the killings of Brown, Harrison, or Champ. Authorities said Robinson found his victims on dating apps like Plenty of Fish and Tagged, met them at hotels where he hurt them, and then killed them before transporting their bodies in a shopping cart. Okay, are you seeing this narrative about perverted behaviors getting out of control? Are you seeing this narrative of abusing women getting out of control? I mean, I think it's just clear as day about how some serial killers are just waiting to unleash their destructive tendencies in the shadows. Others are just nasty to people, and their nastiness escalates. On Monday, a Virginia judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence for probable cause for the grand jury to consider first-degree murder charges against Robinson for the deaths of Smith and Redmond. Robinson's defense attorney argued that the killings were not premeditated and asked the judge to downgrade the charges to second-degree murder, but accused prosecutors disagreed, and they said the defendant lured the victims to their deaths and disposed of them. Okay, I know it's a defense attorney, and the defense attorney has to take a stance and defend the client. However, I mean, if he bought the black yarn from Walmart and used it to tie up the victims, most likely it's premeditated. Or if the fact that he has done this multiple times, luring them to hotels and having some type of rough interaction with them, I'm being careful with my language, and then transporting the bodies, he's doing this to fuel his own excitement and most likely his own sexual gratification. Yes, these are premeditated crimes. Now, even to give one more piece to the prosecution, the way that juries can convict is that, well, what was intentional? They're going to say, well, he wasn't trying to murder them, he was just involved in some type of rough sex act. Well, what was intentional? Inflicting pain on the woman? Was he trying to hurt her during these rough sex acts and she died from that? And he's doing this multiple times, then that's murder. I mean, because murder has intent, and he was intentionally trying to do the hurtful behavior to the woman, most likely against her will, hence tying her up and disposing of the bodies and doing this regularly. that would constitute murder. Because what would someone do? They would shoot someone with a gun and say, yeah, I shot him, but I wasn't trying to kill him. Okay, therefore it's not murder? No, ridiculous, right? Anyone could play that defense if they were going to say that they weren't trying to kill the person. And that is not how the legal system is going to look at these cases. Use them for what he wanted, and then he left them rotting, Prosecutor Marcia Garsh said in court. I mean, yes. It's a very, very sickening thing, but this is human behavior for you. Judge John Stanley Hart sided with the prosecution, saying circumstantial evidence against Robinson was strong, and he had a methodical plan to kill. And he has not been convicted yet. He is unconvicted, but I think that's right. Authorities in Prince George's County said they have opened an investigation into Sky Allen's death, but the case is certain to present challenges because the woman's body was cremated in 2018. Rest in peace to her once again, and rest in peace to all the victims of the shopping cart killer. I'm really not sure the full story on how Anthony Robinson could have murdered Sky Allen and why they thought it was cardiac arrhythmia. I can take a few guesses, but I don't even want to speculate too much upon that. But, very saddening. And because this is a segment where I'm going to talk about some other stories, I want to tie something in very neatly to the case of the shopping cart killer. And that goes back to a book that I was reading called The Curious Case of Etienne Deschamps, which is about a doctor who abused a girl and was convicted of murder. And this book, written by Chris Pena, begins with a particular statement that I'm rephrasing into a challenge question for you guys in the audience as well as myself. Are true crime fans obsessed with morbid curiosity? Okay, the actual phrase was, are true crime fans obsessed with morbidity? And the answer I will propose is no. And I would like to read your responses in the comment section down below. Are they obsessed with morbidity? No, I think that true crime fans are much more focused on human experiences. And the longer that I spend following true crime cases, the less that I want to hear about dead bodies, the less that I want to hear about how the victims were mutilated. And sometimes I read it off here on BlackBoxOnlineRadio because it's in the articles and it's an essential point of the story, but I just want to stay away from that. And I can comprehend how someone can be a horrible and plotting killer without having to read about what they're doing to the bodies because of their own disgusting habits. And more or less, Anthony Robinson murdered these women and then left them to rot with maggots. That's absolutely terrible, and I don't even think we need any greater explanation on that. But there is an element of morbid curiosity in the true crime world. There's also an element of human empathy, which is so much more important, because you're recognizing that these women were murdered, and very simply saying rest in peace to the women, and also you feel that you're looking out for them when very few other people would. And just that type of human connection to not only the victims, but also the victims' families. I think that true crime fans can process that very well. So there's some morbid curiosity, there's some human empathy, then there's the actual forensics. That's another thing that isn't talked about too much, that people who follow true crime cases are very interested in science. When they're watching Forensic Files, sure, because it's in the name, but in all of those shows, people are curious how the science functions. And I think that the final thing that I would share is something that I might have said on the channel before, but I don't exactly have morbid curiosity. I have miserable curiosity. I'm curious about things that would make the average person miserable, like you hear about somebody living in Arctic Canada, up past Iqaluit on some rare stretch of Baffin Island, and they starve to death, and I'm like, I want to try that. I don't want to starve to death, but I want to try that. I want to go into Arctic Canada and just spend the winter there. I want to see what it's like. All the time, I get miserable curiosity. Or say, for example, somebody is earning a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or maybe millions of dollars. I'm not really curious about that lifestyle. Ah, somebody is living, again, in some far-off place like rural China or something, earning $500 a month. I was like, what's that life like? So I guess that's another reason why I'm not rich. I'm not attracted to money. I'm attracted to things that would make the average person miserable. And the justification is you want to try this, and then you want to bring a positive to the negative situation. But let's not kid ourselves. Sometimes people are following true crime cases because they want to fuel their own sense of self-importance. I've even been guilty of this sometimes, but they want to be the person who can connect the dots together and be like, aha, I have solved a murder mystery. Again, I have done that many times on BBOR, more in the past. Now I recognize that it's not easy to solve a true crime case with hours of YouTube, or even anything on the internet. That's something that's going to be left up to the proper authorities. If somebody can solve a true crime case that way, more power to them. It's not impossible. It's improbable. But if you can do it, I wish you the best, and I will congratulate you. And the next point, though, is that another reason why some people follow true crime stories. And I was talking recently about the Darlie Routier case here on BlackBoxOnlineRadio for the Wednesday show. And it's the story of this woman who murdered her children, and she was convicted for it. The book about her is called Hush Little Babies, which I perhaps would read in the future, but I'm kind of focused on some other cases right now, but always want to learn more about these. I'm really quite curious what's in that book. And I think that there are a lot of people online, there are even people who write into this show, saying that they believe that Darlie Routier was innocent, and she didn't murder her two children. But I think that there is just a driving force that makes them not want to admit the truth. They don't want to admit that a mother could murder her children for selfish reasons. Maybe she thought they were a burden on the family financially, or she didn't want the responsibilities, just for something as selfish as that. They think that they just don't want to accept that something terrible happened. And in the world of conspiracy theories, the conspiracy skeptics will always play that card. They're saying that no matter what conspiracy theory somebody's putting out, whether it's involving the Illuminati, the New World Order, the global elites, or any type of society that is controlling and pulling the strings behind the scenes, they're just going to say, well, that's because people don't want to admit that tragedies happen, so they invent these types of fictions that are a little bit easier for them to process psychologically. The skeptics go too far, though, because there are elements of truth in all of the major conspiracy theories, and concepts like the New World Order are very real. The New World Order is the mechanism which allows oligarchy to propagate. Oligarchy meaning concentrations of wealth and concentrations of power only for the few. Yes, that happens. It's not very fashionable to talk about it that way. That's why people go in more extreme directions. And the Illuminati was a real secret society from Bavaria in the 1800s. And again, if you're just going to say there's nothing there, you will leave the stones unturned. I hate to steal someone else's name, but that's what will happen. You will be overlooking very key details in an investigation, or even in something larger like looking into a secret society. So I definitely can accept, though, that bad things happen. I think Darlie Routier murdered her children, but with somebody like Anthony Robinson, the shopping cart killer, people can accept this story rather easily. I'm not noticing anyone saying, no, he's innocent, he's framed. Absolutely, he didn't do it. Almost everyone thinks that he has done it, and I'm just pointing out that sometimes people can accept the verdict when it comes for a person, and for a different person they cannot. But to be clear, at the time of this recording, Anthony Robinson has not been convicted of the crimes that he has been charged with. He has been called a shopping cart killer because he appears to be enormously guilty. Saying again, based on what's been shared in the news, I think he's guilty, and I use the word verdict. I think the verdict is going to come back guilty. I think he's going to be convicted of these crimes, and he will be most likely getting life in prison without the possibility of parole. Well, thank you so much to everyone who's listened to this episode here, and if you would like to talk about any of the true crime cases mentioned, whether it's Anthony Robinson, the shopping cart killer, the Stone Cold Killer, the Zodiac, the Unabomber, Etienne Deschamps, Darlie Rudier, any of those stories. You can put your ideas in the comments section down below. And if you want to respond to some of these challenge questions, are true crime fans obsessed with morbidity? Are true crime fans trying to fuel their own sense of self-importance? Are true crime fans in denial about just simply that bad things happen? If you want to respond to those in the comment section down below, I would love to read your messages. And anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNid88 over on Instagram. And I will see you there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.